need a bigger mouthpiece in person, which is
upgrade.
Upgrade.
This is our in the flesh. Same room.
And we could step on top of each other without a Zoom delay now.
Look at that.
Which is really nice. This is our first attempt at an in-person. Try one. And this is actually the first time I've gotten to see Alex in person since we've had this idea.
Dude, here we are. We did it.
We've done it. And this is really exciting for us. And just like everything with this great experiment is there's going to be some bumps along the way as we figure out technology. In-person solves a couple issues for sure, but it doesn't solve every problem. And so we are continuing to figure this out, but it's been a really fun thing to figure out. Alex, how are you doing?
Man, I'm hanging in there. Things are busy. School is busy. I'm finishing up my doctorate at NEC, conveniently enough, where we are recording right now. Definitely a lot of work. Definitely a difficult year. You said to me once, the second year of the DMA is the worst year of your life. Yeah, this one's tough, for sure. I don't know about the worst deal in my life, but it's bad. It's definitely tough. Other than that, though, things are good. Doing a lot of playing, doing a lot of writing music. Complaints. Yeah.
Well, great.
Overall.
Now, the second year of the doctoral degree, from my perspective, and this is different, this whole, we just finished the series about the collegiate audition process, and I'm still thinking as if we're in that series, but, when it comes to the doctoral degree, I feel like there's a level of variance when you talk about that in terms of the academic workload, in terms of the playing responsibilities. And so your responsibilities here look different than mine did at BU. My second year at BU in particular was an academic gauntlet. And I was trying to put together, I think I only did I did 2 recitals that year. And it was everything in me just to pull off 2 recitals in that year of the 5 that I had to do. And so it was an incredible headache. Worthwhile, I enjoyed it when you look at it from the macro. But
yeah, I've got 2 this year in addition to the coursework. And the coursework here at NEC is very challenging. If you're looking for a doctoral program for a brass instrument that is going to help you play really well, this is a great program. If you're looking for one that is not academically rigorous, this is not the program for you. It is insanely rigorous, and it's no secret that I'm quite academic and I enjoy a good romp for my brain, but this is a lot. There's some very, very, very hyper intelligent people at NEC, particularly in the theory and composition faculty, and you work with all of them, and they are not forgiving at the doctoral level. They treat you like colleagues, not like students, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding if that's your sort of interest avenue. So would recommend in that instance.
I'm very much a student of theory and do not wish to be treated like a colleague, if that's okay. I enjoy it, and I like to think of myself as being comfortable teaching theory 1 and 2 should the opportunity ever arise. But please don't.
You heard it here first. Theory teacher.
Yeah, I would love to. And when I was teaching in Texas, I would have students that would regularly come to me for tutoring and stuff. I enjoyed all of that. Now, once it goes off sort of the rails a little bit and gets incredibly heady, not so much of something that I enjoy doing. But
yeah, we're in the spectralist movement of the 1970s and Schenkerian analysis from the 30s and 40s. So it's spicy for sure, but we're having fun.
I do like Schenker. I only briefly touched on that, and I think the only reason I say that I like Schenker is that I only briefly touched on it.
Yeah, if you knew a little bit more about Schenker, you might not like him so much.
Yeah, that's fine. I like to
not the greatest guy in this.
Oh, I can imagine.
For sure.
I can imagine.
For sure. So we're here today, if I'm not mistaken, if I got the notes right, we're here to talk about another giant figure, but in the brass world, and this is, of course, the famous cornet soloist Jean-Baptiste Arban.
Yes, we are.
And his work.
And we're here to talk about the method book, obviously. This is something I feel like we might all have an Arban origin story. Mine is that when I was a junior in high school, my band director handed me an Arban book and said, you can use this for the next 2 years, it's yours, just make sure you give it back. And I never did. And Mr. Adam, I'm very sorry about that, nor did I pay him the $30 I owed him for it. So effectively, I stole my Arban book, and I'm just going to pay it forward down the road somehow. But when I was in high school, and for several years thereafter, you have this giant book with all of these different things in it, and it can be a little bit overwhelming.
To say the least.
To say the least.
This book is, I mean,
it's dense. And
this is like someone saying to a math major, please read Isaac Newton's Principia.
And then
it's not going to happen.
And then figure out what you can best deduce from that, and then just get back to me. And so it's a tool, and it's a really incredible tool, but using it can be a little bit cumbersome and a little bit overwhelming to the point that I had periods in my own practice, and still on occasion do this, where it's like it kind of goes on the shelf a little bit, because I'm like, what am I doing with this? Am I checking certain boxes, or am I really investing in this the way it should be? And so the point of today's episode is to at least give our attempt at discussing ways to go about utilizing the Arban book so that you're using it as an effective practice tool and not just letting it be a really big, cumbersome coaster on your pedagogical shelf.
Which it is for most of us. It is worth mentioning. This is one of those books that how do I say this better? Let me try. There are two kinds of pedagogical tools in our arsenal. There are sharpening stone and there are fencing teachers, right? And if you are trying to learn swordcraft, use this as an example. This is something one of my teachers.
This is a really cool aside. Swordcraft.
Yeah. So in the world of swordcraft, you have fencing instructors who teach you how to fence, and you have whetstones that keep your blade sharp. And with a fencing teacher, you follow the motions and you practice them and you do them every day so that you can master them. But a whetstone, you're not trying to master swiping the whetstone the same way every way. It's a tool, and it's a tool to be used with intelligence. If your blade is dull, you sharpen it using a whetstone. How much do you sharpen it? Well, not the same every day, right? Because it's going to depend on what the blade looks like. And that's kind of how I think of Arbans. And this is really important because if you just go through Arbans, you say, oh, every day I'm going to do this exercise, I'm just going to play it down, I'm going to work on it, you're actually not going to get that much better. You might get a little better because just by the facet of doing that exercise, you will master those specific intervals with that specific articulation and that specific air. Lovely. But that's not what Arbans is really good at. Arbans is great as a whetstone, meaning, blade isn't sharp in this specific area. Let's find a way to angle it against the stone and grind the blade out slowly, not fast, or fast if that's helpful for that specific motion. It's all about the way you approach it. And that's really important to understand with Arbans.
I really like that. And I think that echoes.
Well, of course you really like that. It was my idea.
It was wonderful. And I like it because it's similar to my idea.
Compliments.
So therefore, since we're just reinforcing our own egos here, this is
two white guys with a podcast,
this
right?
is wonderful. You know, when it comes to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yes, I wanted to make a bit of an aside because you mentioned something that I've considered a lot. When you talk about, I'm going to play this exercise every day. Oftentimes when we base that thought just on a set of exercises, I always kind of think of that as a secondary action. Like if I'm just going to play something for the sake of playing something every single day, but I don't necessarily know why, I'm not doing myself a lot of favors. And I don't know about you, Alex, but I've been to so many trombone masterclasses where a wonderfully well-intended and world-class trombonist will say something around the following: you should do this every single day. I've heard this a million times, and this has, over time, has started to grate on me a little bit, because if I did every single day what every world-class trombonist has told me to do every single day, I would practice roughly 6 hours a day on a variety of different things, and my face would be completely shot, and I wouldn't be able to play anything. And for the record, I don't have anywhere near 6 hours a day to practice, face or time otherwise. And so, to complement your point, you have to be using this book as a tool that is going to help you with something that you actually need help with.
I agree with that.
That you're not just playing it for the sake of playing it. And you have to be selective about all of your practice. The adage that once you get out of school, your time diminishes greatly. It does, and there's various times in your life where it diminishes even further. I'm living proof of that right now with an 8-week-old daughter, which is incredible. It's the coolest thing that I've ever had going on, but time is very much of the essence in my practice. And so I have to plan out what I'm going to do. So when I use the Arban book, it's with a specific goal in mind, trying to get towards something very specific.
Yeah. There are different points in your life where you will have different amounts of practice time. And I know Jim Markey talks about this the way you would build a safe. And like when you're at a point in your life, maybe you're in college. When you're an undergrad in college, you have nearly limitless time to practice if you're a performance major. You might have classes, you might have all these other things, but the reality is you're not tied down by anything other than your class. Yeah, that's the idea. And so if you've got 6 hours to practice in undergrad, you damn well better be doing, a lot of practice time, as close to that as you can get, because what you're doing is you're putting deposits in the bank, particularly out of the Arban's book. I want to work on these trilling exercises, for example. 10 minutes a day in undergrad, it's going to really cycle fast. And by the end, you're going to be pretty good at it. And you've done that time at that point in your life. When you become a mid-30s person like we both are, you hit a stage where maybe you don't have time to hit 10, 15 minutes every day of trilling, but you've put those deposits in the bank and they have accrued interest. So now you can put that deposit in maybe once or twice a week, and you will still be gleaning growth in that account because you have put those deposits in early. And as that builds, you can occasionally take out of that account, meaning you can go to a gig or go to a concert, go to a recital, and you've got trills. And maybe you haven't worked on it so much, but your body remembers how to do it because you've put those deposits in and you've regularly added to it, and they have accrued interest. By doing this, you can withdraw from that account, and it won't drop so low as to require you to put 10 minutes every day back in. Now, interest on each of these skill accounts is not always going to grow the same. Mm-hmm. Some skills, for some people, your interest is so high that you don't need to. For me, where I am in my life now, that's my high range. I don't have to look at it super often. I do have to put a deposit in every week or so, maybe 2 deposits, but I don't have to hit it every day. With my articulation, yeah, I do need to hit it every single day because that is just not a deposit that accrues fast for me. Maybe it's my body, maybe it's my pedagogy, maybe it's the way my oral cavity, my teeth, my jaw, my lips, my tongue are shaped. Maybe it's the way I carry tension. It could be anything. But it's certainly not something I can just trust to be there. My high range, I don't worry about it so much anymore, but that was not always the case. I put a lot of deposits. So
I can't really jump off that any better than that. I completely agree. And I have things in my own playing that we mentioned, we were talking about trilling, and for whatever reason, that is something for me that once I sort of, it clicked. And I know some great players that are better than me that is not the case. And then there are things for me, my mind goes towards efficiency of movement in like the lower register and articulation in particular. I have to be working on that. And to your point, articulation in general is something that I should be checking in on with some regularity, or else that will appear faster than the other things to be a bit of a problem.
There are a lot of people that don't have to do this. You've noticed this, right? People that can just pick up Hungarian March or William Tell and they've got it at speed. I'm not one of those people, not even close. Like I really have to put the time in, and it's infuriating. It really is. It feels very infuriating to be a professional with many degrees that can not just sit down and tag Hungarian March at a fast tempo. Like I have to actually work on it. But that's okay, because not everybody has that struggle, but everybody has a struggle. Definitely. I know a lot of very, very good professionals, people with big jobs that cannot just play a high F. They have to work up to it every day. Mm-hmm. I have that note when I'm cold,
I don't.
And that's nice, but I cannot play smooth 8th note scales at 100 unless I've warmed up. And it doesn't matter how much I practice. That seems to be something I have to revisit every day. That's got to be okay, right? Because we all have that. We all have that Achilles heel. And
definitely.
I don't know. I gave up on being pissed about it a long time ago.
It doesn't serve you to be mad about any sort of thing. That is something that as you get a little bit older and you're playing, and if you can acquiesce as a younger player to
SAT words.
Acquiesce. There you go.
That's a pirate word, isn't it?
Perhaps.
I always think of Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm happy to acquiesce to your request.
There you go. I wouldn't have made that connection.
We taught them something.
There we go. That should help with your ACT and SATs and help you get more scholarship. See episodes 4 through 6.
Just drawing lines.
Exactly, all over the place. But that sort of brings me to one of my first big points. Well, yes, so we need to be sort of objective with ourselves, not get off in the weeds, judging ourselves for what we can and we can't do. It's just it's in a world where there isn't a lot of black and white. I think the way you should feel about your shortcomings can be a little bit more so, where you go, okay, well, this isn't as great for me. However, I just have to put the work in, and I have to make sure that I prioritize those deposits.
How more so do you?
I was thinking a little more row parts. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't sing the beginning of that one off the top of my head.
that's all right.
I'm not upset about it.
Yeah,
But this sort of brings me to one of my first big points, Alex. And what I like about this episode is we game planned pretty well on our own. We have not talked about this. So
which is better for you.
Yeah, I think
you get
so.
honest conversation.
Yeah, because we're going to argue and disagree. No, I have not once heard, so going back to my idea with master classes and all the things that I've heard in those, I have not once heard in any trombone brass affiliated masterclass ever say that you must get all the way through the Arban's book, that no matter what, you must know the entire Arban's book. However, when people mention Arban's, they are more dogmatic that you should be slow and emphasize perfection over speed.
Totally.
And I think that that's our first error as young trombonists is we go, all right, well, I got the Arban's book. Flips open, like we're off riding in the Old West or something. And I've specifically, to that exercise, if you know the Arban book, it's early on, I've heard Joe Alessi talk, that should be so painstakingly slow with every note perfectly cloned that you might fall asleep doing it. And I can't agree more, because what are we practicing other than practicing the consistency of our own excellence?
Totally. So you go, get in the practice room, you're warmed up, you've already done. What is your Arban's? How long are you Arban'sing? What is your approach?
So, I'm again going back to, we didn't game plan this, but I'm glad you threw me a softball without intending. I think on the greatest day of my vacation, for some reason I'm in the Bahamas and I'm playing the trombone. I don't know.
Yeah, I would not be doing that.
I just like the trombone that much, I guess. I don't know. But let's say that I have an entire day to sip Mai Tais after I get done practicing, but I have the entire day to plan out my day. I think at max, I'm looking at 2 15-minute sessions. That's an absolute max.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think a more reasonable is if I'm in the throes of just like a normal, I have time to practice fundamentals after my fundamental routine, however that may look, I'm thinking 15 to 20 minutes of a session.
That's the same for me. Yeah, I like 15, 20 minutes. I think that every trombonist, over the course of their undergraduate study, if they're serious about playing the trombone, possibly for a living, at least on the side at a competitive level, should know the first. I don't think you should have them all memorized. I don't think you should be able to turn it. But if you were asked to play an exercise out of Arban's, you should have played it 5 to 10 times during that time. During that 4-year period, you should have hit that exercise 5 to 10 times. So you can accomplish this with 10 minutes a day of Arban's very easily. 10 minutes of Arban's looks like you pick a random page between 1 and 150, and you play one thing on it. You work on it for 2 or 3 minutes, you turn the page. You play something else, you work on it 2 or 3 minutes, you turn the page. You do this for 5 or 6 pages. That's all you need. That's good Arban's work. In this sense, your goal is to familiarize yourself with the content, because for the first 150 pages, we are working on isolated skills in the Arban's book, and we are building systematically. If you go to page 13 of the Arban's book, and I'm working off of the Alessi-Bowman edition, but the Carl Fisher edition is great too. The pages are a little different, but these are the first studies. They're really simple. They're whole note and half note studies, and they go into very short etudes that work on our These are really great to start with, and I work these into my practice day after my warm-up. I'll do a 35-minute warm-up, and then I will have in my practice either a 45 or a 60-minute technique session that's broken into 3 segments, and one of those segments, 15 to 20 minutes, is Arban's, and I do it in the first 40 to 60 pages. It's really slow work. I'm working on mechanics. I'm air attacking with a haw. I'm making sure my tongue stays low and doesn't jump and interrupt the airstream. I'm making sure my embouchure is stable. I'm using a mirror. I'm making sure I like the sound. I've got my recording device going. I'm making sure the front of the note, ha, 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 that E flat is right there for me. I'm not bushing. I'm not overblowing. I'm not overtaking the pitch. I'm not puffing my lips. I'm making sure that everything is settled in, and then I'm moving on. You can work with these as a whetstone. You can work on any real basic skill, from articulation to breathing to tension to posture to intonation to starts of notes to tapers of notes. You can do anything. You can work on crescendos. You can work on style. They're basically like the simplest version of excerpts because they're about the same length. It's really such a good place for you to be doing your work, and they're designed to be in friendly keys for the most part. But they're also designed in sequence keys, meaning every etude that ends with a 5 is going to be an A flat. Every etude that ends in a 4 is going to be an E flat. And that's not 100% true, but it's true once you get to about page 20. They're sequenced in keys. And the reason for this is so that as you go through the book, you can do a specific sequence of numbers and work in the same key. So, Joe Foley, the trumpet player in the Rhode Island Philharmonic, made famous the date system, where on the 25th you do every etude between pages 13 and 42 that ends with a 5. So you do 15, 25, 35, 45, any of those numbers, that's going to keep you in A flat for most of it. And I know that because yesterday was the 25th and I did them. And so I was working in A flat for most of those exercises. Then you go to the 26th, which is today. I will be doing things that end in 6. And as I just kind of peruse through my book right now, looks like I'm going to be in E flat for most of it. Yeah, it holds true.
You're still nailing down that E flat major.
Yeah, I need to work on it. I'm still bad at it. Dude, it's never done.
If you hold the magnifying close enough, we're all still bad at the E flat
We were
scale.
doing the Collie tune-up book with Steve Lang in studio class last week, and he had us doing these. So the Collie tune-up book has all these chords you have to tune, and you have to memorize how many cents sharp or flat you move things based on the intervals, and you have to be predictive in it. You play the note, and then the drone comes in, and you have to auto-tune it. And he had us each do a different key, and he did C major, and then I had D flat. I went next, and the first note I have to play a D flat before anything sounds. I have to just peg it, and I realized I don't know where 5th position is actually. Like, I think I do, but I had this moment of freezing, and I was like, oh my gosh. Practice your D flat scales, practice your G flat scales, practice your B scales, so you can learn where 5th position is. Super important as a
Yeah, well, and I want to piggyback off that thought, but I want to circle back really quickly. For all the points that you mentioned, I like etudes 11 through 27 for the purposes of a couple different things. Practicing orchestral sustain. I love that you say these are like orchestral excerpts, because you can treat them very much like with this incredibly great sustain with a nice marcato orchestral front and really follow through. I don't have my breath builder with me, but for those of you that subscribe to the use of the breath builder, which is the tube with the little mouthpiece that you keep the ball up near the top, this is a place where I use this a lot.
Totally.
Because what I'm doing is I'm de-emphasizing the weight and stiffness of my tongue, and instead emphasizing the continuity of my airstream, while still getting that pop at the front of the notes. So I love 11 and 27 for that. You can play them any number of ways. You can play them in a more andante sort of, let's say, 88, whatever, to the quarter note. I oftentimes like to play them in cut time so that I get a little bit more, I guess you could call it interest, but it'll still be a slow cut time. I'll use the mouthpiece rim to make sure that my pitch is good, all of the above. And then, of course, and Alex can attest, I have this written, I will transpose these into tenor clef down an octave, all those types of things. And then also, although this is not an alto trombone episode per se, I will play these in alto clef on alto trombone because they're just intervallic enough that if my ear is not activated, it will be dog water. It will be really bad. And so there's any number of ways that you can use the 11 through 27, but I think it's a great place to really check in on your ability to play simply, beautifully, centered and in tune.
Yeah.
That's something that we just take for granted. We just endlessly take that for granted, and this is a great place to make sure that that's checked in.
They're also progressive. So if you begin at the beginning, before you get deep into those etudes, and you begin like, I think it's page 16 or whatever, where the first one is. Dun, 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 dun.
That's 17.
17, I was close. So if you begin there, it's doable. It's not super hard. But as you go 10, 15 pages later, they start to get syncopated, and then they start to get dotted 8/16th, and then they start to get quite virtuosic. They're still short, though. By the time you get to the virtuosic etudes, in the pages like 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, that whole range, You're going to benefit from just experience, lining up the air in the tongue. And as you start to dial in with your targeting, your tongue will be less tight because it doesn't have to work as hard to get this clean front, because you've already lined up your compressed air with the reflex of pulling the tongue away. The air's doing most of the work, and that's how we want to be playing at the end of the day. So again, it plays itself by the time you're done doing the slow work. So it's really all about keeping on with that slow alignment.
Yeah, this is not your time in the practice room to like flex on yourself and be like, look at what I just did and how fast I did it. One, no one's listening. And so the only benefit that you're going to get out of doing that is sort of gradually taking some steps backwards, or at best wasting your time. This is the time to invest in yourself at such a concentrated and, dare I say, highbrow level, to where you are really, I don't want to say you walk out patting yourself on the back because you played Arban slow. But if it's that versus you rush through Arbans and make everything sloppy, go pat yourself on the back and play Arban slow, because you're going to get more out of that.
There are times where you can get away with a little bit of Netflix on your practice stand. This is not it.
No.
Your Arbans is like church. You are there to focus. You are meditating. This is a meditative exercise for your brain. You are zoning, and you are seeing how much you can focus on one single thing that, hey, maybe it's not fun. Maybe it's not musically enticing. Maybe it's not beautifully enthralling. But when you are sharpening the sword against the whetstone, you've got to watch the edge. Because one too many swipes, you have to start again, you lose the edge. If you're just practicing playing through this stuff and you're just not being focused, you could be practicing very bad habits.
Mm-hmm. And just reinforcing things, to my point about just like bringing us further backwards slowly, but thinking, well, I checked the box of time. And if there's anything that drives us crazy as educators and as teachers and as people, it's that time is not to be wasted in the practice room, and that hours do not equate greatness. Hours with methodology and thoughtfulness can definitely lead towards that. And we are all guilty of our Netflix practice or our zoned out practice. We're human beings, and if you're not rested up, and if you're spread in 15 different directions, you can expect to combat some of these things. But do your best to protect certain moments of your practice to where it literally is like this, to borrow from a previous episode where we talk about the amount of money that you're depositing, like not from this episode, but when you're talking about scholarship money that's going towards the work, this is one of those sessions that's high dollar.
Yeah, very high dollar. Totally agree.
I can't help but think in a world where an audition warm-up room where everyone's like da 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 da, and then you're just playing like Arbans, and you're just
there's something chilling about it,
Yeah. Forgive my tenor trombone singing of Respighi there. That was pretty bad.
I always think of Toby's mountain quote, which I will share on Unfiltered. A mountain is not tall because it tells people it's tall. A mountain is tall because it's a mountain. And your playing speaks for yourself. If you walk into an audition room, this is a bit of an aside, but if you walk into an audition room, whether it's for TMEA or for a college audition or for a grad audition or a professional job or just a random talent show, if you walk in and you are just like pasting loud notes to the wall and you're in the corner and you're using bad technique and you're just playing as intimidatingly as possible, not only is it a terrible look for you, but you're setting yourself up to fail. You're leaving all your good notes in. The most terrifying person in an audition is the person that stands there smiling, nods at everybody, maybe waves, maybe says a few words, has their horn in their hand, does not make fast movements, does not set up and try all the high notes and the low notes. They walk over to the corner, or they stand wherever they are. They don't need to be bothered. They play a few quiet notes, maybe a couple glisses, a couple Arban's etudes, check a couple pitches, nod, and slowly walk. That's the person that everybody in the audition room notices. That's the lion in the pack of hyenas, every time. And these are the people that win the auditions because they're focused on what they need to do. And what they need to do is not prove themselves to the other people in the room. No. A mountain is tall because it's a mountain.
Yeah, I mean, that, wouldn't you say, Alex, that kind of complements the idea that we're, as musicians, let alone trombonists or brass players, we're constantly fighting our own ego. Like, what do we want out of this? What do we want to prove to ourselves? And I think it's important that, you have to understand you don't have much to prove to anybody else. And one of the thoughts that frequently occurs to me is even those that really, really care about you, they care about themselves more. That is to say that they're not judging, oh, well, that's so-and-so. He botched this the last time he went to go play it. They're worried about the things they botched the last time they went to go play stuff.
Totally.
They're not sitting there identifying you as X person. Now, if you're a jerkwad and you're that person, it's a little bit easier to draw the parallel. But if you're just like a well-intended, doing the work you should do, honest human being that's fun to be around, you know, that's... Don't spend your time losing sleep over that kind of stuff. Don't go in there and leave your best notes in the audition room, in the warm-up room, and save that. The only little quick story I'll say is I've been in an audition room once. Someone that is now in a major orchestra. I walked in, and this isn't. I'm not suggesting that you do this, but I walked in and I saw this person, and I was like, oh, they're gonna win. As soon as I walked in, and because I knew them, I knew they're playing. I didn't think they were going to take that audition, and I was like, "Oh, okay, well that's cool." And all they were doing was playing Organ Symphony, and that's it. Like they were just warming up with the Organ Symphony, and it redefined what that should sound like to me in the warm up room. And I was like, "Okay, cool. This is a good moment for me, no matter what." And it was, but that was just that person encapsulated that demeanor. Something I want to say a little bit about scale studies, because one of the ways that you could nitpick the Arban book, you know, you talked, Alex, a little bit about some of the rotation of scales, and that is very much true. However, a lot of the Arban book sticks to some easier keys. Like if I'm looking at the scale portion of this, which on the Bowman version starts page 64, you're going through these scales, and what they do is give you more or less an outline in B flat, E flat, and finally we get to some more like heavy hitting key centers towards the end. But in B flat, I had this thought, and I think that this is something that I could do in my own practice a little bit more. I've done a little bit. But if you look at exercises 1 to, let's just say 1 through 5. Let's keep it really, really simple there. I feel like you could glean more if instead of jumping all the way through the entirety of all of the scale exercises and then just kind of playing them down and reading them, I think you could glean more if you worked on transposing the exercises in front of you, 1 through 5, in all of the keys.
What? So like you'd be using a whetstone as a whetstone to sharpen the knife instead of just swiping on it? Oh, that's, yeah, he's right. That's entirely what you should be doing. I suppose this isn't much of a call out because he's already said it publicly, but my good friend Elon Morgenstern, bass trombone soloist, does not like the Arban's book. He doesn't play out of it. He actually hates it. And I think he's probably the most famous player that is anti-Arban. This is not a common opinion, but it's an opinion that's valid for this reason. You know, you ask him why, and he says, because it's all in B, E flat, and A flat, and that doesn't help me when I'm playing in the orchestra as much as it should. So what did Elon do about it? He created his entire own method book, TELP. And that was entirely reactionary to the fact that, you know, like books like this tend to be in brass-friendly keys. And the reason this is in a brass-friendly key historically is because Arban's family, all 3 Arban's brothers that were, you know, soloists, they were playing in a period where military band music was in those keys. You know, this is a practical problem. This was not designed to be an orchestral method book. It was designed to be a method book for being a cornet soloist playing with bands. And so as long as you understand that reality, it's totally fine to say, oh yeah, it's impractical for this use, but I want to use it for this, so I'm going to make changes. And I think that's just active growth in pedagogy. You know, if the Arban's book were written today, it would be 3 times as long, and it would have many more keys in it, and it would probably have longer text boxes that explain different methodologies, and there would be updates, but part of the beauty is that it's not. There's a lot of room for interpretation.
And with that would also come more issues with not being paralyzed by not knowing how to go about it. So the simplicity of it is actually wonderful, and if you take a little bit of the initiative to make sure that you are circumventing the problem when it comes to key centers and the simplicity of them, you can glean a lot out of this. And I mentioned this in a previous episode, and it's just a kick that I'm on, and maybe it's because I'm a little bit shorter on time in some of my own practice sessions, but I'm just loving scales more and more and more and more. And I love the rotation of scales. I love working them in, you know, thirds, fourths, and fifths, and so on and so forth, and in different patterns. And I feel like that is allowing me to stay confident, at least. It could be a complete placebo. I'm not here to say it's not, but I don't think it is. I think that my ability to rotate throughout the keys on a pretty much daily basis is allowing me to understand and to access my technique in all of the areas and registers that I need to play in on a regular basis with more ease and more confidence. And so you don't have to do this on a daily basis because that might be a little bit cumbersome. But let's just say, for instance, you go, okay, exercises 1 through 5. I would say don't even start in B flat. Utilize the fact that it's written and you could read it in B natural. I'm going to go out and say you can do it. Okay,
Yep,
too
totally.
many times we make students feel as if something is really hard. This isn't really hard. You can absolutely do this.
Dude, B major is just your kick, isn't it? You go nuts on this.
I love me some B major.
Like, yeah, this is your podium that you stand on, your hill to die on. But he's right. Trombonists are so scared of B, and there's no reason to be. It's not that much harder than B flat. Sure, the horn doesn't resonate as well in B as it does in B flat, but there's no reason to not work on those half positions and being able to really navigate all of those partial changes.
Well, and I think that, I have this adamant feeling towards the key of B major because of how I grew up, in much the same way that I kind of look at, this might be a stretch, but I'm going to go with it, in much the same way that I look at bolero now as someone that takes auditions and wants to teach and also wants to have to teach that, is that it was a boogeyman at some point in my life where I was like, oh my gosh, B major. And then later on, oh my gosh, bolero, this is so X, Y, and Z. When in reality, it's a skill set that you acquire by doing the right things. And if you go about your high range development in a nice methodical and even keeled way over the course of time, then the notes required in bolero are not that scary, so to speak. And then if you go about your scale study in a nice, methodical, and well thought out manner, B major or any other key signature for that matter shouldn't be a boogeyman that you're afraid of. But at times it's okay to get your butt kicked by it. Like, I'm not going to sit out here and do G flat in fourths for you quickly. I have to sit there and kind of think about that. But that's why I practice it slow. 43-year-old me intends to do that better than 33-year-old me does it now, because I will have done it over the course of time.
It's a solid goal. Do you have any like all-star hits in the Arban's book that you want to show off real quick? Anything that like you think is not to be missed? Because I really want to talk about exercise 27 in the slur.
What page is that?
This is page 52 in the Bowman book. So exercise 27 in the slur is an exercise that I believe is the ultimate exercise for trombone. Period. This exercise is I call these flip turns. And basically this is the ability to turn over a partial quickly without using larger muscles in your face, navigating with the aperture. Norman Bolter, the pedagogue from Boston that was in the Boston Symphony and is now retired from the orchestra, was very famous for saying that all he needed to hear was this exercise to be able to tell if this is all you had to play. He could learn everything you needed to know about your playing. It's really hard because it requires an incredible small control to be able to turn over. This is also an exercise that Jim Markey has all of the trombonists at NEC do. 27 and then on the next page, 28 and 29, which are etudes based on the same skill. I play at this every day. And this specific etude exercise has changed my playing in a way that pretty much no other exercise has. So I want to highlight it as something that's not. And I have a few other one-hit wonders in here that I'd love to bring up, but if you've got anything to add, I'm all ears.
I like that. And I'm going to sit here and tell you right now that this exercise for me falls into the category of the ones that you kind of skip over, and you take for granted and you go, that's kind of a euphonium thing. And I think that as trombonists, we must tread very lightly on in this book because some of it does require technique that might go outside, but we could argue that then you need only just play it a little bit slower.
Yeah, and you're in for a treat when you start exploring those. Those are really good. It's the same muscle that you use to do a lip trill. It's the same control, but rather than allowing it to just oscillate, you're actually measuring the oscillations. Bam, bam, bam. That's a very hard thing to get your body to turn. It requires a huge amount of control while relaxed and a lack of muscularity and physicality. So that's something for y'all to practice. Another hit is page 166. These dominant 5/7 arpeggios are something that my undergrad professor, Jeff Gray, had me do. And we would, every week in lessons, we would set the metronome, and he would speed it up as I went. And I had to read the whole page without stopping. And I would, begin somewhere in like the yum bum 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 bum. And by the time I got lower, we would be at like yum bum 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 bum. And it's really difficult to play these with a controlled embouchure, and they're also really, really good for your slide ear connection because you're tonicizing whatever key you're in on each line, and then it just moves through the circle of fourths. Highly recommend.
Mine isn't as exotic. I will say, and I will also start by saying that I'm guilty of this as well. I think as trombonists or as musicians, we could give a little bit more credence to the cadenza section. I think that we don't have access to a lot of, there are cadenzas in the concerti that are written for us. In some cases, oftentimes they are, standard and everyone does the same thing, and that's all well and fine. But I think that could be a great section. It is a great section. I know our dear friend, Professor Don Lucas, feels very adamant about this, that the cadenza section gets slept on. And I agree. I think that this could be a moment for you to sort of explore the pacing of cadenzas within a little bit more comfortable ranges that are written, because sometimes when we have various cadenzas, what's the plural of that? Is that
cadenzi?
Cadenza. I was thinking cadenzi, but I think
it's cadenzi.
Cadenzi.
Where is our Italian when we need an Italian?
I don't know. I didn't take that at BU, sorry. But that's a great section. For my money, I can thank the Arban book, not exclusively, but in large part, my multiple tongue
I knew we were going here. Oh yeah.
And it started when I was actually a junior in high school. This was one of the few things that I accidentally got right.
Oh, you got it right. I started this when I was a senior in college.
And I would look at some of the exercises, and then of course, Alex, I don't know if you know this, I'm from Texas.
Oh, are you Texan?
Yeah. Actually, born and raised, and we love to do the F Remington as we warm up as a band. And oftentimes you would do an F Remington with articulation. Da 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 da. So I had the bright idea when I was a younger lad that I would go da ga da ga da ga da ga da ga da ga da.
That's a bright young lad.
Yeah, and
well done.
I understood that it sounded kind of garbage at a slower tempo, but that I had to improve that over time, and that at a faster tempo, because nothing grinds my gears as a teacher or as a peer than when someone goes, oh, it's just a lot easier to double tongue that faster. I'm like, well, no, your double tongue is just a little subpar, and it's okay to admit that, and you need to work on it.
So we should have a whole episode where we talk about acceptable ways to tell students that they're either being lazy or that they're bad and they can get better.
Oh, I love that.
Like we need like some really good code, like, hey, the wheel is spinning, but like the lights are on, but it sure seems like no one's home. That answer is like a second story outhouse. You just need something.
The thing that Alex and I take great joy in as we plan this podcast is that there is an endless source of material to talk about, and
we're so grumpy. We're just so grumpy,
and we stumble upon these ideas. Yeah, and we work with. No, I'm not going to say that. We work with great students, and we're just giving them a hard time. We're just giving them a hard time.
I think Kevin, like you heard it here first. I think at some point I should give you all my students for a week. Just tell them that they're studying with me, and then they all get on their Zoom, and it's you, and you just teach them for a week. Because I think you could bad cop some of these guys.
That's a fair point, and I love the idea of, I think bad cop in trombone pedagogy, this is a bit of a hot take, I think bad cop has a place in moments.
It is not a hot take on this podcast. We are 100% in agreement.
Actually, as I say it, and as I sit in the city of Boston, Massachusetts,
spicy. This is a place where you go to get very good at trombone very quickly. It's no secret that Boston has some of the best schools in the world, including, which I will name down for a minute. NEC is probably, I think, the best trombone school in the country right now. But this is a place where you're surrounded by the best constantly. It does not do you well for your mental health or your egos to be surrounded by really excellent trombone playing all the time. So you come here and you get good, but it's an attrition game. You can only be here so long before it really starts to feel tough.
Yeah, the information is objective and it's true, and you have to be strong enough to do with that what you will. But anyway, I will say, okay, so to talk
multiple tonguing.
Multiple tonguing.
Joe and Brian got this right. They start you with a triple tongue, and they start you with a slow triple tongue, right? Da da ga da da ga da. Da da ga da da ga da. This kind of exercise is really helpful because you're doing a legato triple tongue, which is giving you 3 for 2 amounts of tongue dexterity practice rather than just doing like da ga in a double tongue. The triple tongue makes your tongue work more efficiently. So you're actually going to learn faster at the beginning. It's really good. It's super great the way it's built progressively. You're not moving around.
I love it. I mean, honestly,
it's gold. Do this. Just do this. If you are a high school student right now, turn to page 175 and just freaking do this for 10 minutes a day, super freaking slowly. Set the metronome on 60 and just go da da ga da da ga da 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 ga, and just take your time.
It's gonna sound like crap.
It's gonna be so frustrating. You're gonna feel tension in your throat. The air is gonna. When you're done with that, you put the horn down and you just breathe against your hand, and you keep it smooth. Or if you have a breath builder for $22 from Amazon, use that. It's great, but like just work slowly. And if you're a junior in high school, start at 60. The next week, go to 64. The next week, go to 68. You will have an unbelievable multiple tongue in 6 months, and everybody else around you will be like, how the hell did he do that? How the hell did she do that?
You were born with that. That was natural.
Oh, he's so talented.
No. Exactly. You were graced with this ability.
Yeah.
No, you went about it the right way.
No, you took your time. And this book is really good at that. It's a map. This is a map folio. It's a collection of maps for journeys that you have to take. Wow, I wish I'd thought of that at the beginning of the episode. Damn. It's brilliant. This is not a book. It is a collection of maps that will tell you where to sail, but you have to drive the ship. So good.
I think at the very least you came up with the title of the episode.
Damn, that is an episode title. Is there anything in the Arban's book that you don't like? Because I got some. There's some exercises I'm not a fan of.
I think, before we get to that, because I do want to, I think I can come up with a couple of these, but before we get to that, I do want to say when it comes to the triple tonguing section, when I have a slower single tongue. That's actually, if we want to talk about things that I have to invest time in every day, it's just single tongue dexterity and speed. And as most people know, that only gets worse as you get older. I don't know the science behind it, but that's what I've...
Nerves slow.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Your nerve connections deteriorate, and you can move muscles slower. You can flex muscles slower. The reaction time drops unless you work on it.
Yeah. And so...
even if you work on it, it drops.
You have to stick with that. But so that's one of the reasons I was so invested in the multiple tonguing section as I was younger, is because I already didn't have the fastest single tongue and I have to work on it a lot. And so when I got to the triple tonguing section, I actually did DGD, 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 da ga da da ga da da ga da da ga da, which is not the prescribed formula, which is of course da da ga da da ga da da ga da da ga da da ga. As I got older, I learned that at the end of the day, whatever sounds good, and if you can play for someone and they don't really hear what you're doing, that's all that matters, if you're able to get away with it. Now, what I will say is that there are different things in different pieces of music that call upon you to do this in different ways.
Totally.
And I will say it wasn't until last year, and the Arban book, once again in this area, bailed me out, as I was prepping the Bourgeois Concerto and the third movement, I was having some inconsistency issues. And that is actually, per the advice of Toby, and I'm really grateful for this, I went back to the beginning of this and worked on which is essentially double tonguing over the triple tongue sequence. And for now, that's how I go about triple tonguing if I have to do it. And again, if I have to use those other ones, I'll use those. But you can use any of these in these beginning exercises, or really any of these exercises if you're willing to go slow enough, and figure out what works best for you when.
It is worth mentioning that this is actually a divide in the brass pedagogy world, and we should talk about it. There are very high-level brass players at the top echelons of what we do that say you need to be able to double tongue and triple tongue, dugga dugga dugga, and dugga 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 dugga, and da dugga 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 dugga. You need to have a mastery. There are also, not as many, but still a sizable number of brass performers at the highest levels that do not use the triple pattern da-da-ga at all. They only use an alternating double tone da-ga-da-ga-da-ga. And you should know, if there is a right answer, I believe it is that you should have access to all of them. But the validity that is presented by the people who have found ultimate success winning the top jobs, only using the double pattern and never learning the triple pattern and saying it's unnecessary, it's not necessary, it's not as fast, it's not as convenient, it doesn't lend credence to the reality that either system works. So, what's the takeaway? The takeaway is that it doesn't freaking matter as long as it sounds smooth and the same. We're listening for a congruency of sound and an ease of access at all speeds. So it doesn't matter which you choose to use. I would recommend if you are a young student that you develop all of them because that is the optimal way to do it in terms of just the math. But if you are an advanced player and you have the ability to use an alternating double as your triple and you can play all of the rep and you can record it and it sounds really smooth and you don't want, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I will not put the top 5 players on blast that do not use triple tongue, but there are some of them, they occupy top 5 jobs.
Yeah, no,
so
they're great players.
It can be done. It's all about finding solutions that work to get you the achieved result of clean music and artful artistry.
Yeah.
All right, so here's my hot take.
Yes.
I despise the art of phrasing section of Arban's.
Okay.
And let me defend myself.
Which is exclusive to the Leslie Bowman. Correct?
Yeah, so Joe Leslie and Brian Bowman, Dr. and Mr., put this section in because they believed that there was a lack of education in phrasing and that this was a good way for young students. The idea is that they used folk songs that everybody would know and that you could play them and learn to phrase them. Do you see the problem? I think it's pretty obvious. We don't know these songs anymore. That is the problem. The problem is that these are folk songs that everyone should know, but nobody knows any of these songs.
Tears?
Yeah, I've never heard "Why Do I Weep for Thee" by William Wallace.
Puritan's Daughter? That's
I've never
banger.
heard "Dutch Air" or "Now the Swallows Are Returning." Yeah, by Friar Abbott. Yeah, no. it's just
Friar Abbott.
Yeah, dude. Like, here's the problem.
That's awesome.
In a world where we have access to Spotify, and you can play along with recordings by ear, even if you don't have good pitch, and you can just repeat it 1,000 times and learn it. It just doesn't make sense to me. Here's the thing. These are here so you can learn how to phrase. You're supposed to do so organically. And a big secret to that is knowing how these sound. But if you don't know a song called Russian Hymn, it's not a practical use of your time.
And especially if you just go at it. Like, you don't actually listen to anything that's a reference to, and you're just like, I just play
Plus, not to mention the ethnomusicological issue, put on my doctor hat for a second, with taking a folk song and writing it out in classical notation and then asking you to play it as if it is not written out, but naturally, and try and phrase it as you would if you were singing it, not from notation. There's too many degrees of separation and translation. I think a better use of your time is if you want to play along with recordings, get Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, YouTube, whatever you listen to your music, or CDs if you're not a streamer, put on headphones and play along. Make a shit ton of mistakes. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. You're alone. Nobody's hearing you. You just keep repeating it. Eventually, you learn a lot of these songs by ear. If you've got good ears and you can do it, great. And if you have bad ears and you can't do it, learn to do it. It will come with time. Any skill can be built. And this is a really, really great way to build your phrasing. It's far easier than getting frozen by reading "Now the Swallows Are Returning" by Friar Abbott. I have 4 degrees in music, and when I look at this, I see triplets against sixteenths against dotted and all these markings and all that. How can you think about trying to phrase when you see 2 eighths and a dotted 16th tied in over a slur with an accent on the middle note? What the hell does that mean? Like that's it's so confusing to me. It defeats the entire purpose of what these are here for.
I think you put into words an issue that my brain had resolved on its own as just like, I'm not gonna play that. I think that it was.
Oh my god, I love that. You're like, well, not for me.
Yeah, it's a page turner.
It's so frustrating.
Well, because when we're talking, the idea that this is essentially as if you took a real book and you took the standards in a real book and then you wrote out the inflections that you want.
That's what it is.
And you were more dogmatic about that, when, to Alex's point, when it comes to these, cultural sort of songs, or the word is escaping me, but that they would be performed in a more free style that is better served as an oral tradition that you should be practicing. And this is a perfect example to utilize your ear, I think, and be working on specifically strengthening your ear, which we've talked about in previous episodes. And Alex and I can both agree that most students do not do that enough, especially those that are pursuing more classically based, education. They love to read off the page. This is a great This is a great time to get away from that.
And let me put my foot in the door here to defend, Lord Bowman and Lord Alessi of our world, because they were not ill-intentioned in putting these in here, right? Both Brian Bowman and Joe Alessi are of an older generation than we are. Joe Alessi's mother was an opera singer, and he's Italian. Many of these Italian opera airs were probably songs he heard growing up in the house. These are folk songs that he can sing. He probably knows all of this rap. A lot of these British folk songs, Brian Bowman probably has heard. These songs were much more common a generation, 2 generations above us. When you get into like Silent Generation, Baby Boomers, Greatest Generation, even some older Gen Xers, like these are songs that you might recognize. For us, it's not so much. It's if you wrote out a bunch of Taylor Swift songs, a bunch of, like you get some Toby Keith in there. These are songs that many people from our generation would be able to play along to.
Toby Keith is an interesting pull, but
I thought I'd throw that on you and see what you did.
I'll let it slide.
I like putting him on the spot.
I don't hate Toby Keith.
The point here is that the best way to learn to phrase is to remove the page and to play along with people that phrase really well, with songs that mean something to you. That's the best way. Because what you're doing is you're removing all the impediments of structure and you are just allowing your brain to connect. Once you've done that, you can then add in structure and allow your body to learn how to transmog that, basically. And to that end, seeing notation can be really helpful. But you have to know how it sounds to be able to make that jump, to bridge that gap. You have to be able to understand the phrasing and be able to say, I'm looking at Black Eyed Susan right now. It's a folk song. You need to know how it goes in order to really understand the way it's written and how that affects the phrasing. I just think there are better ways to do it. And for that reason, I'm not the biggest fan of this section. It was a long-winded trip, but
I'm glad we went there because, like I said, I just didn't even really consider it. When I think of the purposes of these, I understand that it's important to get into more complex music as we progress, obviously, but when I think about phrasing studies that are appropriate for younger students and phrasing studies that still serve me, if we're speaking strictly something that's written on a page,
we are.
I like the Chimera books.
Yep,
like that,
brilliant.
The book, rather.
Brilliant.
That's where I'm going to go if I'm looking to scratch that itch in particular. Keep things easy, keep things beautiful, whatever that might be. And if I'm going to
agree more.
If I'm going to go beyond that, then I'm going to find art song that I like, and I'm going to play along with that. I'm a big believer, for my own recitals and for what I want for student recitals in the future, to have an art song. This is something that I kind of dream of in my future syllabus. To have an art song requirement within a recital, and that it has to be a serious attempt at memorization. It's not to say that you, like, if I have a student, there's obviously some students are incredibly blocked in that way or have some issues. That's something to consider. But a serious attempt at being able to play it memorized. Because for me, I did the entirety of Brahms' 4 serious songs from memory. And I worked on it for like a long time.
That's
and
pretty serious.
It was very earnest.
I did my entire master's recital, and Toby asked, he said to me, "You seem like you play better memorized." And I said, I definitely said, okay. And I did it. And it was better than any recital I could. And I learned that. And then for my second recital, he said, let's do it all unmemorized and see what's different. I got through it. I was on the page. It was hard to rap, but I was on the page.
There's a level of comfort that comes.
Different topic for a different day. But
it really is, because there's a lot of validity to that, and I'm thinking about my experience, because with BU, that's a requirement in our recitals, is that you have to do at least one serious. They sort of name it as like a serious piece memorized, and so I made that requirement in all of the ones that it was a requirement, and they tended to be the better. But I think that's a pretty thorough flushing of the Arban book, and some important ways to go about it, some things to consider, some things to avoid perhaps. Do you have any other final thoughts on that, Alex?
Yeah, this book's heavy physically. If you're not a tech person that has an iPad, what you should do is you should photocopy of your book that you have purchased, and you should print them. And then you should add a few extra pages in of random exercises you like. You should staple them together or bind them and carry that with you in your case. If you start doing this, you never have the excuse of not having a 5-pound book with you so you can't practice them. If you're at school, if you're traveling, if you're on vacation, wherever you are, if you have this small packet of 50 pages that are bound together, this little mini book, if you were, you will save yourself the headache of not having access to a tool that you really need. I highly recommend it. I've done this. Now I play off a tablet. Before I did, this was my go-to for the Arban's book. I never left my house. And when I left my house, I had a travel version that I had made. Highly recommend.
There you go, folks. Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us on our first in-person episode.
So cool.
Yeah,
Dude, I think we did good.
Yeah, it's great to actually, it makes it easier to communicate, obviously, and we want to keep doing things like this, especially for the YouTube version of this, that we can get something that you can actually watch, and we're excited for what's ahead.
Yeah,
so
make sure you subscribe. We are on Spotify, doing a bigger mouthpiece. We are on Apple. We are on YouTube. Help me.
We're on Amazon. We are on Podbean. Is sort of our home base
It's
for
our
the
launching pad.
Yeah, if you will. And if there's a platform that you're listening, that you like to listen from, and you're like, hey, this is where I listen to most stuff, but I only listen to y'all on, Amazon or something, let us know, and then we can look towards expanding in different areas. But make sure you're following on Instagram too. Following us on Instagram is helpful, so you kind of know what's going on. And we got more and more big things planned in the future. So thanks so much, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, happy practicing, everybody.